Hello and welcome to Off the Roll. I'm your host, Troy Hirschman. Well, this is episode 37, and today we're talking to Rex Sharp. Rex is the Associate AD for Health and Sports Performance at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach, Florida. Rex has been around a long time, and that's why I wanted to get him on the podcast and kind of tell his story. Rex started out at Northeast Missouri State in Kirksville, Missouri, and then on to Ball State, where he's a 1979 alumni of Ball State, and then on to Missouri for 25 years, and then currently, with some in-between time, at Embry-Riddle. So Rex is a friend and a mentor, and so this conversation ended up being a long conversation. So grab that beverage. Rex would probably have a Bud Light or a Land Shark, and cozy up. If you're on a long drive, don't drink and drive, but enjoy the podcast because it is a great conversation. Let's go off the roll with Rex Sharp. Welcome to Off the Roll. I'm your host, Troy Hirschman, and today we have our guest is Rex Sharp. Rex is the director of health, Associate AD for Health and Sport Performance at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach, Florida. Obviously a Ball State alum in the Ball State Ring of Honor. And so we're just going to talk to him today about his career. How you doing, Rex?
Good, Troy. Thank you. How about you?
I'm great.
Good.
Great Sunday. We're doing this on a Sunday afternoon because our schedules, this is about the only time that allows this. So, no, we're going to get right into it. So, obviously I've known you for a long time, and I think that I have a good idea of what your athlete training history is, but let's talk a little bit, like where was your hometown? Where are you from?
I'm from New Albany, Indiana.
Okay. So sunny side of Louisville, right?
Yes, it was. Yeah, it sure was for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. So, high school, were you, did you, what did you do in high school that may have kind of sparked an interest in athletic training?
Yeah, I think when I was at New Albany, I dabbled in a lot of different things, as a lot of us do. And we were fortunate enough to have an athletic trainer, Jerry Bell. He was in his first year at New Albany, and just getting to know him and realizing that he needed a couple of extra hands, and he was a really good mentor for a year. And then he left and went to I think get his PhD. He was in Arizona, Ball State and Arizona grad, master's at Arizona. Then he went to get his PhD. And when he left, a guy named Don Ogle came to Ball State, Don being a Western Michigan grad. And Don Ogle was probably as much responsible as anybody for me continuing in athletic training. I think Glenn Snow was at Floyd Central at that time.
Yeah.
And between Don and Glenn, I was able to really be around some very dedicated, professional, but fun athletic trainers, and really was all set, honestly, Troy, to head to Western Illinois with Duke LaRue as an undergrad.
Oh, wow.
And then both Don and Glenn encouraged me to look at Ball State. I don't even know whether I even knew where Ball State was at that time. I lived a very sheltered life in New Albany, so not true. But anyway, Ball State ended up being the place for me, and man, with that history and that program and the things that I've learned about the program since, there was no better place for me to go.
So how long was Don Ogle at New Albany?
Well, I don't know. He was there when I left, and then beyond that, I don't even remember when he finally did leave. And I think he moved back up towards Goshen, which was his hometown.
Right. That's where, that's where it was. That's where I kind of made that connect with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me think about, and I'm going to think kind of working my way back. I think so I left in 75, graduated from New Albany in 75, and I knew he was there then. I was hired back at New Albany as a teacher, athletic trainer in the fall of 1979. And I think someone had been there, and I'm not going to remember who right now, maybe 2 years prior to me getting hired. So Don might have been there maybe through 77, perhaps, and then someone else took over for a year or two. And then I don't know how I worked my way back into that job, but
Yeah.
it was almost like the old TV show Welcome Back, Kotter. I've used that. If you've ever seen that show, it was
Yeah.
about a guy who went back and taught at his high school, and that's what happened to me too. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was fun. It was a great learning experience for sure.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about well, I mean, so you helped Jerry Bell and then Don
Yeah,
Ogle and stuff. I
right.
mean, what for a student athlete trainer in the I'm assuming you graduated from New Albany when?
75.
75. So
Yep.
again, athlete training is not there's a obviously sprinkled a little bit around, like you said, you had Glenn and
Yep.
Don and Jerry Bell and stuff in that area. I mean, what were you doing at the high school level to help out?
Oh man, now listen, Troy, that's 50, almost 50 years
I
ago
know,
now.
just do your best. It's okay.
I think probably we had a just I look back on, our let's say our whirlpool, for example, was one of those whirlpools that had a fan, an actual fan inside the whirlpool, and with a little bitty like a chicken wire fence around the fan to make sure you didn't cut your toes off. So I'm sure, I look back on, I mean, I'm sure that I did fill, drain, clean, ice bags, stock stuff. And I mean, I really don't really honestly remember much
Yeah.
about that, but whatever it was that I was able to do, was interesting enough for me to decide to go and study it and end up making a career out of it. Whether it's been a successful or not will be judged later, but it's been good for me.
I don't know. I think it's probably
It's been
it's been
okay.
judged a lot right now, and you have a lot of hardware to show
Yeah,
for that. But
thanks.
um, so they kind of Glenn and Don kind of talked to you about going to Ball State. Did you go up on a visit to Ball State before you got up
I
there?
don't think so. I don't think I did. I do know this for sure. I can remember Don Ogle, again, tremendous, tremendous guy, great mentor for me. The NATA convention in 19 maybe 73 or 4 was in Kansas City,
Okay.
and Don wanted to go, and he had a buddy, and God, I wish I could remember. So the two of them and me, we drove to Kansas City from New Albany and went to the convention. So 1973 or 4 was my first exposure to the NATA convention, and of course
Wow.
at that time it was relatively small, uh, really small compared to what it is now. And it was all held in the Crown Center Hotel. So it was only one venue, not a convention center per se, but just in the
Right.
hotel itself. So that was a great thing, kind of being around other people who were athletic trainers. I mean, up until that point, the only ones that I'd really met were the ones that I mentioned. Uh, then I know there was a Kramer workshop that was held at Floyd Central. And Glenn sponsored that. And of course, Kramer workshops were, as you and I and a lot of us
Yeah.
did Kramer workshops later on in our professional career. But uh, Glenn had one at Floyd Central, and Jim Dickerson and Ron Sindri came down to help. And so that was my interaction with them. I don't honestly think I ever went to Muncie to visit the campus prior to my enrolling at Ball State.
Wow. Okay.
Honestly, yeah, but the impression that they made for me and on me, we both know them, and they're great people, and they were great athletic trainers. But first, they were great people,
Yeah.
and I just the impression they made upon me made me realize that that's really where I wanted to go to school.
Yeah. Had they talked to you about Bruce Scott at all a little bit before that time, or you just
No, nope. I met Bruce later
yeah,
on. Yeah, it was those two, and I'm trying to think of I'm not even I don't think it was Jack Mansfield that was the third assistant at that time, but I know John Falstick came a year later, and I know Andre Seeger was there too.
yeah,
And of course Don Vogelsang was the head athletic trainer when I went to school there. But those are the ones that I can remember the most.
yeah.
But no, Bruce never met Bruce until after I was out of school.
Okay. So you get the Ball State. I mean, and again, I'm asking you, I'm taxing your brain here a little bit, but
Oh
if
boy, yeah.
you get the Ball State, and you kind of know that's what you want to do. Back in that time, were you in classes with anybody? Did you just go talk to Don? I mean, how'd you get hooked into that?
pretty intimidated by Don. I
Yeah.
think a lot of us were at that time. Don, and was an ex-Marine, and he was a physical therapist, athletic trainer. I think he played football at Ohio State,
Oh
and
yeah.
just
I actually have a box of stuff he gave me that there's a letter in there to him from Woody Hayes asking
okay.
for a donation to the
Oh,
physical program. And I don't know what I'm supposed to do with it, but I got it.
yeah.
So
All right. Well, all right. Well, but Jim and Ron in particular were just very approachable, and I think with regards to classes, there were three of us that pretty much went through the program together. That was Rex Call, who I love to death, and Tom McCoyak, same thing, and myself. The three of us went
wow.
all through that program together. There were probably others, but in the end, when we graduated, some of the others had either decided not to pursue athletic training or they had transferred because the three of us were the three amigos at that time.
Right.
Not all of us were alike, and we were all from various places. I mean, Tom from South Bend and me from the opposite end of the state, and then Rex from over near Lafayette.
Yeah.
Just a relatively small town, and I think all three of us ended up doing pretty well.
Yeah, you did. Well, yeah, I mean, that really is between you're all Hall of Fame athletic trainers in some way,
Yeah,
shape, or form. And
yeah.
so um, you know, I guess one of the things I would ask, I mean, you talked about Andrea Seeger. I mean,
Mhm.
in that time frame, were there very many female students that were starting to come around in that program?
No, there weren't. There were a couple, but gosh, there were two, I think. But I know for sure. Andy had a little athletic training room over at Ball Gymnasium. It wasn't a big room at all.
Right,
And I know that there really was no interaction that I could see for sure for my first 2 years there between men's athletics and women's athletics.
right,
Completely separate. Don was the head athletic trainer, yes, but rarely ever saw Andy come into the men. At that time, it was called men's gym. Now it's
right,
university gym, of course, or was when I left. I don't know if it's still called that or not, but she rarely ever came over there. But I think I'm pretty sure I was the first male to ever work over at Ball Gymnasium.
oh wow,
And
okay,
Andy was extremely gracious and good teacher, and I'll be forever indebted to her for allowing me to do that. I mean, uh, and I think just similarly then, and I know we're getting to when I came back to Ball State, but I don't think, any women had ever worked much with football until I started there.
right.
And one of the reasons I was committed to that is because of what I was able to learn from Andy and just working with the different sports and different genders. I think that's real important.
Yeah, yeah. Um, uh, I know we'll get to that in a minute, but
Yeah,
I know
sure.
my time was it was a great experience despite a lot of obstacles and hurdles and stuff that were going on. But
There
uh,
there
any,
were a couple hurdles.
yeah, any but so talk to me a little bit about the Bobby Gunn Scholarship Award.
Yeah, that was
I know, yeah, but that at the time that's a big deal. And here we are at Ball State. You mean Fosdick was Fosdick the first one to get it?
yes, he was in 1975. Actually, I believe he won that award.
Yeah,
So John was a he was a senior when I was a freshman, and again, we didn't interact a lot. I mean, our hours were limited. They were limited. I mean, we couldn't go in there and live in the training room like I did when I
yeah,
became a graduate student. But uh, John was someone who I really did revere at the time because he did win the Robert Gunn Scholarship, and at that time, Troy, there were only four. I'm fairly certain I'm right. Four undergraduate scholarships in the country.
right,
And John won that one, Robert Gunn Scholarship, which was supposedly given to. I always thought it was the outstanding student trainer in the country until I won it, and then I know that must not have been the case. But it was just maybe there were only four people that applied the year I won. I'm not sure, but uh, but John was someone that I really revered, and when he won that award, I thought, man, I want to be like that guy.
right,
And well, somehow, despite my shortcomings, it ended up working out okay. And when I won the award, Glenn Snow and Jim Dickerson and I went out to Las Vegas to get the award. And again, it was in conjunction with the convention, and the convention at that time, still though a lot larger than it had been 5 years earlier in Kansas City, it was still held in the MGM Grand Hotel,
Yeah.
and it was just in the hotel. It wasn't out and about, right? So,
Yeah.
and Jim and Jim and Glenn and I had a pretty good time out in Las Vegas. When I was fortunate enough to get that award.
Yeah.
And then, followed that up. Then that was 1978, and followed as a junior. And then was 1979 was able to get a National Football League sponsored postgraduate scholarship. So they didn't amount to much money, but it was really quite an honor to be able to get those. And the 79 award was in St. Louis, so my parents were able to drive out from New
Wow.
Albany and be there for that one, and so that made that pretty special too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's I think those things, I know for me, knowing that you had won those awards, and then there were other, the internships in the NFL and stuff, it just kind of set the standard for a lot of us that we all had to. We felt like we, just like you did, we felt like we had to hold up those standards a little bit when we were students, and I think that the culture is important, and unfortunately, sometimes now these days the culture is not seen as important or revered as it should be, in my opinion. But
There were some other really good students at Ball State besides John, and Mark Smith, for example, was a year ahead of me, not three. No, maybe he was 2 years ahead of me, not three like John was. But Hop Klepser was another one that was, a very, very personable guy.
right,
And for those of us who were younger in the program, occasionally, we'd get our ass kicked, just from whether somebody talking to us or whatever. And then those guys that come up and say, man, just keep your head up or whatever.
right,
It's no different than any other team. I mean, we needed some people to pick us up every now and then, and those guys were always there for me. So consequently, then when I became a senior, I've tried to do the same. And yes, I had won those scholarships, and yes, other people knew that. But I was just in the right place at the right time, and there are other people more talented and gifted than I was.
yeah.
I just happened to get the award. That's all.
Well, I mean, yeah, you can say that.
I can.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So when you came in, because you got to Ball State in
75, fall of
75.
75. Hmm.
Yeah. So Tim Garl had been gone. He went to
Yep.
Alabama
Right.
before that, correct?
Right. Yes.
Okay. And then 79 did was Tony Cox kind of coming into the picture at that point in time? Were you guys, yeah, what was
Well, yeah, Tony, yes. So the fall of 79. So yes, fall of 79, I did my student teaching. Okay. And I did that student teaching at Jeffersonville High School, which was down near New Albany, and
yeah,
Jeffersonville had just hired their very first, as far as I know, their very first athletic trainer, full time, Terry Smith, a gal that had graduated from Indiana.
okay.
So I get there, I get there in August, and Terry was just starting, and clueless isn't the word, but to say that she didn't know what she was getting into would be a more appropriate description. So I know for sure that I was able to help her,
Yeah,
kind of get her feet off the ground. And so let's say at that time we were on the quarter system, so maybe I student taught until, November or whatever, and then moved back up. Tony was there, yes, and he was a little bit of a non-traditional student, a little
yeah,
bit older than I was, but had just started into the program. I don't know that we really overlapped in the training room a hell of a lot. I really don't remember. But
right.
I know one thing, and we'll get to that too, but that guy's like a member of my family.
Yes.
And I didn't know him as well then, but when I went back later on, a few years later, man, there's no way I could have done that job without him. No way.
Yeah. Yeah. So in that time at Ball State, did you, one of the things um that that Glenn talked about was that sometimes he got some opportunities to interact with other athletic trainers at other schools. Did you get an opportunity to do that?
Yeah, yeah, we did. As I look back on a couple of the district meetings, we didn't interact a lot through the year, but I think at district meetings, which would always be held kind of around March, uh, that's for me, and it even stayed that way and has stayed that way for a long time. I prefer the state and district meetings over the national, except that at the national, we have a lot of us Ball State people that are there.
Right.
But that District 4 meeting, man, it was like a who's who of athletic trainers. I
Yeah.
mean, as I look back at the impression that they made on me, really. I mean, District 4 was a powerful district with a lot of well-known, with Pinky Newell being just one of many. I mean, I could
Yeah.
go on down the line, Pinky at Purdue. But you meet those, and Jim had introduced us all those guys, and these are
Yeah.
people that we had read about, we had heard about, and we're in the same room. I mean, that's pretty cool. But I always did think that meeting people there, as Glenn would say, that again a huge impression on me
Yeah.
as an aspiring professional. I can remember the first time I met Otho Davis. He's the one that presented me with the Robert Gunn Scholarship in 1978, and he was a living legend,
Right.
being the NATA president and also the head trainer for the Philadelphia Eagles, and a good friend of Jim's, and on and on and on. I can just keep going. But man, what a moment that was for me to be able to meet him, and then here, later, I mean, we're talking it socially. I mean,
Yeah.
as I grew older in the profession, being around him, that was kind of natural. But boy, the first time I ever met him, it was really something.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, and I get that from, when you were talking, and we'll talk more about how many people you connected with the NFL, but yeah, just Otho was a presence. I mean,
Yes,
just,
he was.
yes, just a presence of stuff, and the
Yeah,
amount of stuff that he knew, and who he knew was
yeah,
just really, really incredible.
yeah. I agree.
So you graduate from Ball State.
Yep.
Um, and you get this opportunity to go back to New Albany. Kind of walk me through a little bit what led to that. Were you looking at some GA positions, or were you
Yes.
like, I'll just go
Yeah,
back and
that was a tough decision, and a lot of my career decisions have been difficult. That was one because having won those two scholarship awards, there were quite a few programs that had, I guess, approached me about coming and being a graduate assistant. West Virginia was one, for example, and I did go visit there. I did go visit, but um, I just decided that I needed to make a little bit of money, and as I look back on it, it was really a little bit. The key word there was little. To be a teacher, athletic trainer, that's something I always thought was cool. And again, I go back to where Jerry Bell and Don Ogle, that's what they did.
right.
And then I had and they did it at New Albany, and here I had the opportunity to go back and do the same thing. And at that time, I thought, well, this is certainly what I really want to do. And naturally, it was in my hometown. So all of us that graduated in 75, a lot of those people still stuck around New Albany. Uh, I've always thought that was kind of strange, everybody just kind of hanging around the same place. I mean,
Right.
I like to get out and go, but anyway, I went back and reconnected with a lot of people there that I hadn't seen for a while. But I know, Troy, the one thing, I taught biology, which was not my major. I was a general science major. So biology was one of the five sciences, but not my major. So I was learning right along with the students. I was 22. Some of the students were 18. Uh, that's challenging. I mean, I had fun for 2 years. In fact, I had a lot of fun. And I think from the sports standpoint, working with the teams was what I was really interested in doing. I didn't really give a I was not a great teacher. I'll put it that way.
Was
Uh,
and New Albany had some success in the sports that
yeah, yeah.
kind of in that time
Well,
frame, didn't they?
particularly basketball.
Right. Yeah.
Uh, that's funny that team in 79, the 79-80 team was the team that went 27-1.
Yeah.
And the only game they lost was in the state championship against Broad Ripple. And so interestingly enough, and if I look at my phone right now, there are 9 guys on that team and myself that are still in a group text, and they text all the time. And those, so we had a little reunion of that team, maybe 6 years ago in New
Yeah.
Albany, and it was absolutely a blast, to get back and see them again. They're only 4 years younger than me, so it's not like there's a lot of difference there.
Yeah.
But and then in 80-81, we followed that up with a team that was 20-5. So in my 2 years there, we were 47-6 in boys basketball,
Yeah.
and
And
that's not
and that says something back then. That's single class. That
it
is
really
a
was
big
single
deal.
class. Yeah, it sure was. Yeah, and it was cool. And my sister Rhonda was the statistician for the team. So when we went to games, we had a bus, not a school bus. We had a regular bus, and it was first class really. And Jack Ford was our head coach, and we had a blast. And that's what this whole group text thing all the time. I mean, it's just a lot of reminiscing. And when we
Yeah.
got together that weekend in New Albany, that was a fantastic weekend. And we still, again, we stay in touch. It's once a week. I mean, at a minimum. And we're all over the country. I mean,
Yeah.
Richie Johnson's up in Wisconsin. I'm down here, and Rick Ford, Jack's son, lives in Atlanta, and Jeff Stoops is in Arizona. And I mean, it's just incredible, really.
Yeah.
But
No.
yeah, it's pretty cool. But then at the end of those 2 years, Troy, my uncle Randy Owsley was an athletic trainer. I think you know that. I'm not sure
Yeah.
everybody else does.
Right.
But Randy had gone to Western Illinois he went to Taylor. First of all, he went to Taylor because he played basketball. Then he went to Western Illinois under Duke LaRue as a graduate student, which is my connection with Duke LaRue, who I absolutely do revere. He finished his career at Nebraska, University of Nebraska. But anyway, Randy was the head athletic trainer at Michigan Tech University, which is a Division two school up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And he had worked and worked and worked, and finally got the okay to hire a graduate assistant or two. And so I ended up having that opportunity to be one of the first two
Yeah.
graduate assistants at Michigan Tech. And I don't even recall, I don't think I'd ever been up there, which was up, again, that's pretty far from New Albany. It's 16-hour drive and about 360 inches of snow, more than what we got in New Albany. But man, I wouldn't trade those 2 years for anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought I was a decent athletic trainer, but I knew I wasn't a good teacher. But I had the chance to go up there and get a master's degree in exercise phys, and Randy was at the point in his career. Yes, he was a good athletic trainer, but he didn't take one trip in my 2 years there. I took the first year I did all the football and then ice hockey. Ice hockey is their Division I sport, and we were
Right.
really good in hockey. I'd never been around hockey, so what a great experience that was. And then the second year I was there, I did football again, and then men's basketball, and after that was over, sometimes track and field and some other sports up there too. But what a great 2 year experience for me,
Yeah.
just being kind of solely responsible for a Division II NCAA Division II football program. I mean, I did a decent job, I know. We didn't have great resources. We don't didn't have anywhere near the resources that I would later have in other places that I've been, but we made do, and we provided pretty darn good health care up there. I'm pretty proud of that. So that was a great
Yeah.
2 years. Yeah.
So how what kind, I'm going to ask this, what kind of orthopedic support did you have at Michigan Tech? I
Well,
mean,
we didn't have
weren't
our
there,
closest, yeah, our closest orthopedic guy was 100 miles away.
yeah.
In Marquette. In
Oh
Marquette,
my
we did have a
God.
really good we had a really good primary care doc, Ken Rowe, and right there in Houghton. And his son David Rowe was a student athletic trainer with me when I was
Oh
a
wow.
GA. His son, yeah. So then but uh, our orthopedist though was down in Marquette. So, again with the weather and everything, we didn't. I'll say this: we had a good orthopedist. We didn't have great support because we couldn't always get down there in a timely
Right.
manner. As I look back on those days and what I do now and what I did at Missouri and what I did at Ball State, having access, we didn't have that kind of access.
Right.
I guess our players didn't know any different, so they probably thought we did a great job, but we could have done it a little bit better had we had a little more access to the people we needed.
You really have to rely on your skill set
Yes,
to be creative and think of stuff. I mean, and to kind of do stuff on your own when you don't have that type of access,
for
basically.
sure. I learned a lot. I mean, Dr. Rowe taught me how to, do stitches, put sutures in, and now they learn that in school, I'm sure, in a
Yeah.
program, but we didn't learn that. I mean, there were a lot of things we didn't learn. We didn't learn how to take a rectal temperature either. So, just things that are pretty commonly taught now.
Right.
We didn't do those things.
Yeah.
So it's just that 2 years though was outstanding. I mean, a lot of good people. Culturally, I'd never been up to the UP, but never been around anybody from Canada, and about 70% of our hockey team was Canadian.
Right.
So their background and my Southern Indiana background, and I know we drank a lot. I know we had a lot of fun, but and we won too. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean, again, and I've heard, I've heard Bob and Tom talk about this,
Yeah.
because obviously they were up in Marquette,
Yep.
correct? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's what they talked about. Is like, what were you gonna do? We drank a lot. Yeah.
That's what you said. Yep. Yeah. There was, and just the weather, gosh, the weather was so different. I mean, my first fall there, it snowed on October 1st. and there was snow on the ground from October 1st to May 17th. I
Yeah.
mean, there was snow on the ground at all times. And through the winter, there was always a constant 46 to 48 inches of snow on the ground. So you just have to find other things to do.
Yeah.
You ski, you snowmobile or
Yeah.
whatever, sled, whatever you do, but it's a different way of life, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get that. That was me at Utah my first year when it snowed in
Oh,
October.
that's right. Yeah,
Holy
sure,
crap.
sure. Yeah,
I'm used to the
it's a
leaves
yeah,
falling. I'm not used to the snow.
for sure.
So you graduate from Michigan Tech and you're kind
Yes.
of looking for jobs.
Yeah.
What kind of opportunities did you have?
Yeah.
And then what did you eventually settle on?
Well, this is interesting, actually, and I've told this story a few times to anyone who really cares. Uh, I get out in '83 with my master's degree, and I had decided that I really wanted to stick with the college level. There were, in the mid '80s, there were a limited number of opportunities.
Yeah.
Okay, and I know you know this, but so the primary sports were basketball, football, baseball, uh, and hockey. Okay, there weren't a lot of other opportunities. And so, or you go work in the college level, which is what I had decided I wanted to do. Or you go to a high school, which is where I'd already been. I knew I didn't want to do that again, or I didn't think I did. So I was pretty selective. I mean, with the background that I had, I really felt like I could be a little bit selective. So there was a job at University of Oregon for assistant football. Their head athletic trainer is Dean Adams at that time. So I applied for that job. There was a job at Northeast Missouri State University. Never heard of it before, never been there before. Uh, I guess geographically, Northeast Missouri State has to be in the Northeast Missouri. But I didn't know anything about that, but I did apply for the job. So I get a phone interview with Dean Adams at Oregon. This would have been probably late June of '83. And that went really well. And I took it from my parents' house in New Albany. I mean, that's where I made the phone interview. And he called back the next day. It's a funny thing too, no cell phone. So Dean Adams is calling my parents' house to
Yeah.
get to hold of me. My mom's, oh, hey, Rex, Dean Adams is on the phone. She had no freaking clue who that was. So he offered me the job and verbally over the phone, hey, we'd love to have you come out to the University of Oregon. I'd like to be here at such and such a day. But, and obviously I was flattered. Never been to Oregon. Oregon football meant nothing to me at that time.
Right.
They turned out to be pretty good, by the way. Uh, I think today they're probably still number one.
Yeah, they think they
But
are.
I think, but anyway, it had to be within the week. Let's say I get the offer on a Tuesday, sometime before Friday, and I'm ready to go blaze the Oregon Trail. I mean, I've got I'm packing stuff up in my car. I'm getting ready to go, and I get a call from Bill Richardson, Dr. Bill Richardson in Kirksville, Missouri. He's the chair of Health, Physical Education, and Recreation at Northeast Missouri. Never again, don't have any idea where it was. So he calls, and again, no cell phone, so he's calling my parents' house because I was living with them. And he said, "Hey, Rex, Bill Richardson, we're a little late on the thing here. We've never had an athletic trainer before, so we want to be pretty selective with who we hire." And he said, "We'd like you to stop by and visit Kirksville. We'd like you to come for an interview, Kirksville, Missouri." I said, I've got a Kramer workshop in DePaul with Rex Call.
Oh.
Yeah, that's good. That was coming up. And I said, and that's in DePaul, Greencastle, Indiana. And then I was going to head out to Oregon. And he said, well, we'd sure like you to stop by on the way. So we kind of talked a little bit about it. And I said, I'll call you back. And my dad and I talked about it. I can remember this too. And I said, I've already accepted this job, at Oregon.
Yeah.
And Dad said, yeah. He said, but it might not hurt, for you to take a look. Okay. So that's kind of what we did. I went up to the Greencastle, had a great time at the workshop as always, because I love Rex. Went out to Kirksville, Missouri, Kirksville, Mo. And I drove into town. I'm thinking, man, this is, the town of about 17,000.
Yeah.
The school's cool. I really like the campus. So then checked into the hotel. I drove back over to the campus. I had a pair of red gym shorts on, a hat, and maybe a tank top, right? I mean, and I'm in my car at that time. I walk into the gymnasium, not expecting to see anybody. I was just trying to check it out. I walk in, there's some trophies there. I'm looking at the trophies, and Bill Richardson walks out of his office. And I'm in a hat and a pair of gym shorts and a tank top. And he said, "Hey, I'm Bill Richardson," and I'm almost embarrassed. I'm thinking, "Well, God, I'm here for an interview," but I had nothing to lose. I had a job anyway,
Yeah.
already offer. So we talked for about 2 hours, just casually in his office. He introduced me to the athletic director, Ken Gardner, and we talked. And then I went back to the hotel, changed, had dinner with both of them. That was really fun. Went over, toured the campus the next day, did the actual interview itself. They had never had an athletic trainer, so I'm not sure they really knew, what they were getting into, first of all,
Right.
with me, but not only with me, but with, athletic training in general. They are a Division II school. They had a good football program. They had a really good track program. They had a very successful men's basketball program. Willard Sims was their head coach. And so I interviewed, and I think before I left town, I was going to go back to New Albany and then turn around and drive back to Oregon because I didn't take, a car full of stuff with me. And so before I left town, Dr. Richardson came out towards me with the parking lot with me and just said, "Hey, you're the guy we want."
Yeah.
And I was flattered. So I said, "Well, I've got to make a couple of calls." So I called Dean Adams. That was my first call. And I said, "Sir," I said, we'd never met, Troy. We'd
Right.
never met.
Yeah.
And I said, "I've got an opportunity to be a head athletic trainer at a Division II school in Missouri. But I want to respect, our conversation and he stopped me and he said, son, he said, if you've got an opportunity to be a head athletic trainer, you should take the job. He said, it's going to benefit you professionally for a long time. He said, I'm personally sorry that we're not going to have you here, but I think it'd be the best for your professional career." And man, Troy couldn't have gone any better. I mean, he could have MF'd me all the way up and down. I mean, because they
Right.
had given up their search, after I accepted. But anyway, I took the job in Kirksville and yeah, it turned out to be pretty good. I mean, I met Eileen there, and the rest is history, as they say. But that 2 years there was a great, great learning experience. My first summer, when I first got hired, I went and got my stuff, came back to Kirksville, found a place to live, and then I had to build tables. I had to get cabinets. I mean, my first athletic
You're-
training in Kirksville, when I walked into that room, it had a telephone and a filing cabinet, and that's
Wow.
all. That's it. And so we had to go to work, and then so I had 1 month, essentially July 1st to August 1st when football reported to get that place ready to go. And I did. And I mean, I was so nervous and almost scared when school started. I'm thinking, God, am I really professionally ready to take this on?
The
And
imposter syndrome kind of,
yeah, oh my God. I mean,
yeah.
I was, and so I started working there and had a brand new football coach, a guy named Jack Ball, his assistants, Jim Anderson and Pete Buha, Eric Holm. I mean, these are guys that I remember. So, I mean, I've got a picture up here somewhere of that first
Yeah.
staff. And I got to tell you, the football camp went well. Of course, we used to do two-a-days. Camp went really well. Uh, Coach Ball knew a gal on campus, Teresa Myers, who had helped maybe tape ankles or something,
Right.
and so he introduced us. And I taught Teresa how I wanted taping done, so that way she could tape my ankles while I was treating injuries. And somehow, man, that first year we got through it. And I
Yeah.
will tell you that there were two football managers there at that time that were huge help for me. And we used to go on home games. On home games, we used to take a pickup truck over to the golf course and I would say we stole a golf cart. We used to load it up on the. They probably knew, but nobody ever said anything. We would take the golf cart back to the campus and I would use it that day, and then after the game we would take it back. I mean, that's the honest to God truth. And at the end of my first year, and it went well, man. I mean, the first year was Willard Sims is awesome. The basketball coach, we got along awesome, and the kids were great, and they knew I was really making an effort to help.
Right.
At the end of the first year, there was a room, just a space that became available in the athletic department. Coach Gardner, the athletic director, was in the hospital, so I needed to get that space. I mean, I was
Yeah.
committed to going and getting that space to make a new training room. And so I made an appointment with the president, and I never met him. And uh, I went over to his office. I was all dressed up. This is in the middle of the
Yeah. No,
summer
no,
now.
no red shorts and tank top, right? This.
No red shorts and tank top. No, no Charles McLean. And so I went into his office, and And well, what can I do for you, son? And I said, well, here, I'm Rex Sharp. And he said, well, I've heard a lot about you. I'd never met him. I heard a lot about you and the work that you've done over in athletics. And what can I do for you? And I told him, I said, well, sir, there's a space. We can quadruple the size of our athletic training room. I'll need some things done in that space. Take the old carpet up, put tile down, make a place for the whirlpools, etc. And he said, well, you really think it'll help us? Yes, sir, I do. And he picked up the telephone and he called the physical plant and he said, hey, I'm going to send Rex Sharp over to see you. And he's a good man. He said, you give him whatever he needs.
Wow.
And the whole month of July, they worked their butt off in that room. And Troy, the second year I was there, we had really done something. And
Yeah.
then I had I'd also taught class my first year there. I taught a class in care and prevention of athletic injuries. There were a few students that had expressed interest in helping. So my second year there, oh, I also got two GAs. I forgot about that. I worked really hard. I really worked really hard to
Yeah.
get that done. So my second year there, I had two graduate assistants and about 11 students. And
Oh,
man, we
wow.
were coasting. Well, we were coasting. I mean,
Yeah.
we that second year was awesome. And then we had some athletic success. And then at the end of the second year, this right at the beginning of the summer, is when Jim Dickerson called me and told me that Don was going to retire. And he said, "Hey, we'd really like to have you come back to Ball State." That Jim told me.
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, Jim," I said, I really got something special here. I feel good about what we're doing at Northeast." And he said, "No, Rex," he said, "we really need you."
Yeah.
Well, that meant something to me.
Yeah.
And then I moved, you know. I mean, it was a tough, that was, I told you there were a lot of points in my career where there was a very tough decision. That was a tough decision because I'm really proud of what I had done at Kirksville,
Yeah. I mean, it's,
starting from a telephone and a filing cabinet,
yeah.
and meeting my eventually my wife. I mean, I'm really proud of what we did, and that was a tough decision for me to leave that behind.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
I mean, I always say that I think that God's put you in places where
yep,
you're supposed to be at.
yep,
And
for sure.
and sometimes we don't think that's where we should be at, but that's where we're supposed to be at.
Yep.
And obviously Northeast was a place that you that's where you were supposed to be at. Now,
Yeah,
now one quick question.
yeah.
Do you know who took the assistant's job at Oregon when you didn't take it?
No,
You
no.
never
Do
knew.
you?
Never
No, I don't. No, no. I don't
That's
know.
cool.
The first time I ever met the dean, you know, passed away, but his successor, I finally met. I went to a Don Joy workshop out in San Diego, and she was there, and Billy Cowgill was there with me. We
Yeah,
were there together. This is when I was at Missouri, and had a chance to meet her, and so they did a lot better without me, yeah,
yeah,
I'm sure, than
yeah,
what I could have provided. But you know, I mean, like you said, I was in the right place at the right time.
yeah. So you get this call from Jim.
Yeah.
You and Eileen married at the time, or
Oh
were you?
no, 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 no. We you know, Kirksville, small town, 17,000.
Yeah,
That how we met. Everybody asks us all the time too. Uh, so when I started out there. Uh, I ended up buying a new car. My first brand new car was a 300ZX. Tony talks about that car all the
yeah,
time. A red car that looked like it had been it was moving even when it was sitting still. And I did have a personalized license plate, RLS ATC. And you know, Kirksville again, very small town, so pretty much everybody knew who I was.
yeah,
And so at the end of the first year there, it was actually graduation weekend, my first year there. And one of the graduate assistant football coaches, Bill McCarty, came over to the house. And there was no school. He came over to my house. We bought a case of beer. We had a few beers, and the one of the football players who owned a lot of his parents owned a lot of land in Illinois. They were hosting a party out at Thousand Hills State Park. So Bill and I said, well, you know, we ought to just go out there and see what that's all about. So I got in the car, my car. We got in my car. And we drove out to Thousand Hills State Park, and there was a pretty big party going on. And of course, everybody knew me. And except for Eileen, naturally. And she,
yeah,
she comes up to the car window, and somehow we ended up talking. Neither of us really remember that. I'm going to tell you
yeah,
right now, neither of us really remember interacting at that get together and go about our business. She didn't make a big impression on me, and I don't make a big impression on anybody. So anyway, the following year, school starts. We work through football. One of my best friends, probably honestly, one of my oldest friends is the Coors distributor in Kirksville,
Yeah.
Greg Lloyd, who is a great guy. He's been down here to visit in Florida, and when I moved back to Columbia, he was always down in Columbia visiting. But he still owns the Coors distributor. It's much more than Coors now. He's got really a very impressive business.
Yeah.
Anyway, Greg and I went out after our first basketball game in November of '84, and we went out together to a place called Two Talls. Two Talls was a bar in Kirksville. I played softball for the Two Talls team, and their owner was a good big benefactor for the program at Northeast Missouri Athletic
Yeah.
Program. So he was a big donor, so we go there all the time, essentially. So Greg and I go get a drink, and Eileen and her roommate Jane were there. Well, we didn't recognize one another. Obviously, neither of us remembered meeting, but Greg knew Jane, and Greg said, "Hey, Rex, this is Jane Hampton." And okay, good. And Jane said, "Well, this is my roommate Eileen Kiernan." And okay, there's the four of us. We talk, we leave, and yeah, I do remember that one. And but we didn't have cell phones,
Yeah.
and I didn't know her last name. I couldn't remember her last name. And so she's in the process of moving, so there would be no way to really get a hold of her. So I don't know how it all came about, but somehow I get word that either she called me or I got word that she wanted to talk to me again or whatever. And then, so we started seeing each other at that time. And we weren't married until we moved to Muncie.
Yeah.
Because that was my second year, and so we had a great relationship then from November, well, really December, all the way through when Jim made the phone call. And I remember, I went over and interviewed with Don Purvis and
Right.
Andy in maybe May or June of '85, and then I went back to Kirksville and tried to explain. Eileen had never been to Muncie, and I tried to explain kind of what Muncie was all about and what Ball State was all about. And then when I got the call about getting the job, we went over together so
Yeah.
that she could see the place. And then we went back to Kirksville so I could move. I'm going to go. This is an extended story. I'm going to tell you this whole
No, you're
damn story.
fine. You're good. We got all the time
So,
in the world.
okay, good. So we go back. So we go back to Kirksville, and I've accepted the job, and now it's time to move. So I just moved into a brand new apartment. So we put all my stuff. I had a guy there that had a van, not down by the river, but a van. And so we put my stuff in the van, and then I had my 300ZX, and not very much stuff in
Yeah, I was
there
gonna
because
say
it
there's not
wasn't.
very much stuff going in that.
No, not very much in there. But I had to be back in Muncie, somewhere around July 1st. So he's going to follow me. That's the plan. He's going to follow me. Well, that van didn't keep up with my car very well, and I'm zipping across Illinois trying to evade the highway patrol, and I don't see the van. I don't even know where the van is. And again, we have no cell phones. So I get to Muncie, and I think I called back and just let Eileen know that I'd made it. I may be wrong about all the particulars, but I think I called back and said, "Hey, I'm in Muncie. Do you have any idea where Joel is with the van?" Well, the van had broken down.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, yeah. So the van with all my stuff is in it somewhere in Illinois, and I'm in Muncie. And now I'm starting my job, so I really have no way to go back and get. I guess it needed a new transmission. I really this is years ago, but I'm thinking that's what it
Yeah.
was. So somehow I think I loaned him the money to get a new transmission, but in the meantime, Eileen decides she's going to move. And we're not married, but she decides she's going to move to Muncie. So unbeknownst to me, Troy, I didn't know this was happening. So someone at Ball State had made arrangements for me to stay at the Korean House, which is over by Wagner Hall. Okay, Wagner, Jeep and Wagner, that complex over there. So I'm in the Korean House. Can't speak to the people that live there. They can't speak to me. We'd almost bow to each other when I'd walk in, because we really couldn't we couldn't communicate. But that's where they
Who
decided.
who would have made those arrangements though?
I don't know, man. I guess the athletic department. That's all. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't make this shit up. There's no way. So I'm in the Korean house, and unbeknownst to me, Eileen rents a U-Haul and puts a dolly on the back and puts her car on the dolly, and she goes and meets Joel, puts all the stuff out of the van in the U-Haul, and then she's embarks on this trip over towards Muncie. Well, I have no idea that's going on.
Yeah.
And so maybe at the end of the first week of fall camp, 2 days, I'm at the Korean house, and I hear some people come, I hear voices, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
Lord, she shows up. She's there. She's in Muncie. And I'm like, well, what is this? How is this? And she told me the story about Joel, the van breaking down. And again, the lack of cell phones really contributes to the whole ignorance on my part. But she shows up in Muncie, but she somehow, when she got over towards Lebanon, her car was coming dislodged from the dolly, her car.
Oh
So
my
she had
goodness.
to leave her car and just drive the U-Haul over, leave the car over here. So then we had to go back. I think that was Friday night. We had to go back on Sunday and pick up the car. It's a hell of a thing. It really is quite a thing.
So did she have another car hooked up to the U-Haul or a truck or?
No, just her car. That was all she had. And so she just left her car there. She just drove the U-Haul, and left the car. So we had to go back and pick up the car. I think it was Lebanon, I swear. I think that's where it was. Oh my God. And so now she's there. I mean, I've got her a room at the student center. She couldn't stay at the Korean house, so she's at the student center. And we had really
Which
never
is where you should
considered.
have been.
I know I should. Yeah, you're right. Cheap sons of guns over there. But anyway, we didn't know what we were going to do. We really never talked about renting a house or anything before. I mean, we weren't planning on doing that. We didn't even have a wedding planned at that point. But we she found a brand new 2-bedroom house, brand new. I think it was on, oh well, I don't remember right off, 1610
Yeah.
something. Yeah, in Muncie. And so we moved in there, and it wasn't very far from work, which worked out really well for me. Uh, and
Was
then
that the duplex that was right off of Rosewood?
no, this is it was a
Okay.
single house. Yeah, it was a single house,
Yeah.
and it was brand new. I mean, so my parents came up. We got the house in pretty good order, and it worked out pretty well for us. And
Yeah.
then we got married. We got married there at Hazelwood Christian Church in '86, February 28th of '86. And I had yeah, and then she ended up teaching at Blue River Valley schools. Somehow, I'd played in the Cardinal golf outing down at Cardinal Hills, and the superintendent of schools was there, and we just met. I mean, I had no influence in getting her the job at all,
Right.
zero. But we met, and I said, "Oh, my wife is a music teacher," and she got the job, and that turned out really, really
Yeah.
good.
Which
Yeah.
is ironic because the guy that took her place is still at Blue River.
Oh
It's
my gosh, really?
it's
Yeah.
insane. Yeah, it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, Eileen's a really good music teacher and has had wherever she's gone, it's been very successful. And so yeah, she loved it there. It was a good place.
So you get the Ball State and you kind of you've kind of built this program up at Northeast very, very quickly. But now you're at Ball State and you actually have a little bit of a staff. You've got an education program, obviously. Kind of
Mhm.
name, I mean, we've talked about Tony a little bit, but kind of tell me who was here that when you started.
Staff wise,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
and I can remember some students, but I don't want to forget any either.
No,
So I
no,
hate to
don't.
leave.
We won't do that
But
right now. Yeah,
staff wise, Cindy McKnight was
yeah,
there, and Tony, and I guess me. I guess that's about it.
yeah.
And again, small group. We had 8 students. That's what I can remember. My
So
first,
so so was Mike
yeah,
Farrar, was he out trying to
yeah.
get
We
his
we didn't have we didn't have an academic program director at that time. So when I got hired, there was a lot to do, Troy. There were a lot
yeah,
of things that, and again, this is a long time, 40 years ago. But So John Reno, remember Dr. Reno,
yes,
who I have great admiration for and respect for. He called me in his office and he said, "Hey, listen, we've got to hire an academic person. Uh, do you know anybody?" I said, "Well, yeah. I mean, I know some people." He said, "Well, here's 5 folders of the people that we've been real happy with, just reviewing their materials. Can you look at them?" And Troy, I knew 2. I won't name them right now. Mike was one of the 2.
yeah,
And so we brought those 2 in for interviews. Those are the 2 we brought, and then ultimately we got Mike, which was a great thing for us.
yeah,
And we went to work on restoring the program to the where it should have been.
yeah.
It had kind of faded a little bit there, I think. But the 8 students we had, I mean, they tremendous, great workers and very interested and again, they've all done pretty well despite my influence. But Tony was there with me, which was again, I'll go back and tell you that there's no way I could have done the job without him.
Yeah.
We had a new head football coach at that time, Paul Shudell, had just come in. He'd just been, he was, this is another thing that would never happen now. Okay. So when I was interviewed, Paul was not part of the process. He was gone. He and Mary, his wife, they weren't even in town. So it was with pretty much just Don Purvis, the athletic director, who lives in Florida now somewhere, and his wife, Pat, and then Andy.
Yeah.
So I interviewed with them and probably Dr. Reno. I mean, I'm assuming, and
And
hardly
no
remember.
team physicians at the time. You didn't interview.
John Klaus, Dr. Klaus
Oh,
was the
you
team
interviewed with Dr.
physician,
Klaus. Okay.
but I'm not sure. I'm not sure I did. I mean, because I knew him from when I was a student, so I'm not sure that I ever did really per se interview with him.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just so Paul was not part of the process. So my point being, when I get to Ball State to start my job, all of that stuff that was happening, and I'm at the Korean house and a whole bit. Uh, the first day I ever met Paul was when I walked out on the football field for practice the very first time.
Holy smokes.
There's Paul. I walk up and we meet and and now that listen that's been that was the start of a great relationship
Yes.
even to this day 40 years ago. So when we'll fast forward real quick. I get this job because I failed at retirement. I get this job. I take this job. Paul and Mary lived in Ormond, Florida, Ormond Beach, which is about 9 miles from here.
Yeah.
They weren't going to be home in their home while I started this job, so they let me live in their house for the first 6 weeks I was here.
Beats the hell out of the Korean house, doesn't it?
Yeah, I didn't have any Korean maids. I didn't have to speak of Korean when I went home. I had no problem with any of that. Yeah, no masseuse. You want massage? I didn't have any of that when I moved into Paul and Mary's house. Yeah.
Oh,
See, that
wow.
would not happen today. Where would you go in a Division I program where you don't meet a head coach, like the head football coach in
Yeah,
particular?
no, I mean it's or any coaches for that matter.
Yeah,
They've
really.
all got their hand in
Right.
it. And to the
Right,
point
right.
now that unfortunately they're making the hire.
Yeah, yeah.
That
Unfortunately, yes.
yeah, unfortunately that's where it's at. They're making the
Right,
hire.
right.
Not necessarily looking at somebody who's medically competent. They just
Right.
want to have somebody that will agree with what they want to do.
Yeah,
And
I can go down a list of schools right now that have done that. Yes,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
and so that's the difference, and that's why I think again personally, and we'll get back to your story here a little bit, but I think that for all the advances of healthcare that are out there right now, some of the best healthcare that was done in those situations where it was an athletic administrator, it was a medical group that was making those hires because they knew what from a standpoint of medical um, expertise that they were looking for to take care of the student athletes. And unfortunately, in this day and age of a more business like atmosphere, that's what they're looking for. So
Yep, yep, for sure.
so
Well,
so so go
yeah, go
ahead.
ahead. Well, I
No,
was just going to say it was just Tony and I pretty much with football and the eight students that there are eight good ones though, man, and I think I remember them all, but we had and Deb and Joanne were two of the gals that Deb Wright and Joanne Winters who were working with us with football. Fortunately, Paul being new, me being new, Paul had been at Michigan where they did have some females working with
yeah,
football. Uh, then because Lindsey McLean would allow that up there. There's another guy that I revered when I was growing up. And so we did some good work there. The first 2 or 3 years, I mean, we really had things going. Mike was a huge help. Ferrara, he actually worked clinically with baseball for me that first year, maybe even two, before we really had things going. And man, I think we did a decent job of getting the program back to where it needed to be,
yeah, a decent job. Yeah, I
its
think
rightful place, in
I
athletic training.
I would take away decent and put excellent job there because
Thanks.
all of us, I mean, that's the thing is that for me, I obviously transferred in from Vincennes and I was getting Indiana State, you got to go to Indiana State, they've got the best
Mhm.
program, you got to do this, and I was a little bit more of a rebel in the aspect of like I want to go do something different, and I was okay with that, and obviously when I met with Cindy because Mike was gone at that time when I came in to visit. I could sense that this was going to be a better fit for me rather than Terre Haute, and just because of the people that were there,
Yeah.
I think that's the thing. You could sense that I remember very 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 well walking out that first day when I showed up in the summer and walking out to football practice out to the north practice field out there, and I've told you this story a lot, but I'm out there and I'm just trying to make an impression, so I want to help in any way, and I'm out there helping Joe Burton hang up some hose because Joe was telling me what to do. And
Yeah.
then I walk back over, and I think you and Neil look at me and go, he's just a student just like you. You don't have to do what he tells you to do, and I went, oh, and then you're laughing, and I'm like, yeah, I'll be okay.
Joe was my age for one thing, so that's you
Yeah.
know I guess I did fail to mention too when we talked about me getting hired there. I think I'm pretty sure I was the youngest Division I head athletic trainer in the country when I got hired at Ball State
Yeah.
at 28 years. Now that happens frequently now, I think, but at that time, I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure that was right. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I was just lucky to be in the right place at the right time.
So so when you get hired, you're here. Obviously, there's a lot of experience in the MAC. Did you draw upon any of those guys to try to help you out with stuff, or were you still trying to figure it out on the fly?
No, I won't say no. I did have some idea. John Falstick was
Right.
at Kent. That was huge for me. But yeah, there were Gail Newton was at Miami, and Gary was up at Eastern Michigan. John Mason was at Central. Denny was at Western.
Yeah.
So you're right about that. Now and then Skip Vosler was down at Ohio. I mean, we had a pretty good group,
Yeah.
and I look back at that first. I don't know that they still do this, but we had the conference athletic training meetings in conjunction with the track meet.
Right.
And that in itself, there are several stories that go along with all those track meets my first couple or 3 years there. But you get together with those guys, and again, those are guys that I had heard about prior to me getting hired at Ball State. Dave was up at Toledo. I mean, good God, there were a lot of good people.
Right.
And Wayne Vaupel was at Northern Illinois, and then of course they thought they were too good for the league. They got out of the league, and then they ended up coming back into the league. But that was about the extent of it at that time. But man,
Yeah.
some good people, and yes, I did make some calls here and there,
Yeah.
uh, but I didn't have it all figured out. Don't get me wrong, but every situation is unique,
Right.
and we had a really good group, and it all comes down to people, and we had a really good group of people. So as I know, as I went along in my career at Ball State, I did get calls from other people because they knew we
Right.
were doing it the right way. But with people like you and other great students that we had good people, Troy, and that's really what it came down to.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to ask you about this because again, we haven't totally covered this a little bit
Mm,
because obviously when I started this podcast, Hoove was gone and or pretty close to, or wasn't in any decent health to talk about this. But
right.
one of the unique things about you coming into Ball State, obviously in 85, 86, Dick Hoover obviously had a lot of influence on the outpatient physical therapy world, and we've talked about that in other podcasts. So, what was the idea and the approach that they came to you guys about kind of partnering with Baxter to
Yeah.
kind of do this unique thing about billing for services?
Yeah, and I was always a little skeptical about that, to be brutally honest with you. But Glenn Snow was working with Dick Hoover at that time, and of course Dick Hoover he's also a Ring of Honor member from Ball State,
Yeah.
and they did approach. I'm not so sure it was me first, but they approached the university with
Ah,
this philanthropic idea of, hey, we'll take over, we'll assume the salaries and benefits of the athletic training staff if you will allow us to put a physical therapist in the athletic training room, and then you can bill for services, right? I mean, philosophically, I never liked that idea, but I mean, it wasn't just me making the decision. And so I will say that right off the top, the three of us got a little bit of a salary bump because, Baxter was a corporation, not a state entity like Ball
Right.
State. And so our salaries did get a little better. But for me to sit here and say that that was the smartest thing that we'd ever done, that's not going to be true.
Right.
Uh, we had a pretty good close group of people, and I think the first person that they put in our place wasn't one of those people. And hey, I'm not saying we did it. It worked out okay because when she decided to leave, uh, we got a guy named Neil Hazen that turned out to be, again, like one of my family. And man, once we had Neil in place with Tony and I think you talk about the three amigos. I mean, that's really
Right.
that things just took off. I mean, as you know, I mean, you just have to have the right people in place at the right time. And I think Neil had an interest in becoming an athletic trainer. I had known Neil because one of my original 8 students, Bruce Reeder and Neil, were pretty close. Bruce was a physical therapy student in addition to being in the athletic training
Right.
program at Ball State. And his good friend was Neil and is a good friend. And so I don't know whether we went out together on New Year's Eve or that seems like that's right. The New Year's Eve of maybe 87 after Eileen and I were married. It might have been 86 though, but anyway, that's kind of where I got to know him. So when Donna decided she was going to leave Ball State in her role with Baxter, then Neil was kind of a natural for me. I mean, from the personality standpoint, the work ethic standpoint, it was a natural. And so we were fortunate to be able to do that. And man, that's when things really took off for us, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's it, very complimentary of personality wise of you and Tony's personality, and you bring Neil in, who is kind of the straight guy, you know.
He was, yeah,
In
he
more
was.
ways than one. We'll
Yep.
find that out later. But
Yeah. Yeah.
eight kids later, he's a straight
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but um but that was the thing. I've often asked him, like, what do you think the secret sauce was and how everybody got along there? And he just said, we all wanted the same things,
Yeah.
and we want to do our best job to take care of people, and we were all invested in doing that. And then at the kind of off to the side, we really liked educating students,
Yeah.
students that were enthusiastic and stuff. And I think that's the thing that um that's what he had told me, is he felt that was the commonality of it, and then having a hell of a lot of fun
We
along the
did
way.
that.
Yeah.
That must have been a real moment of clarity for him to make that kind of a statement. That doesn't sound like Neil.
Well, I think there were a
Would you
few
have him
drinks
drinking or
in
what? I mean,
maybe there were a
yeah,
few drinks
yeah,
in him, yeah, when
yeah,
he when he did
yeah,
that, when he said that. But
yeah.
but um but no, I mean, I know that's my fondest memory. Some of those memories of obviously when I got to Ball State, you were just getting ready to move out of University Gym to the health center, and because they were getting ready to build the
God,
arena and stuff.
Jesus, I'd forgotten what years you were there.
Yeah, and so my time was, there's a lot of stuff going on in the health center, and that's why, if you listen to Neil's podcast, I specifically asked him about Noah Lubenkheimer,
Yeah, sure.
and
Like
just
being in a submarine, man. That office was like being in a submarine. Have all these pipes above you, above our very short too. I mean, right above our head, popping and cracking.
and
It
and
was a,
what that and then I remember, you had just gotten that new Stairmaster, and you were trying to work furnish out on it, and you had to build a
yeah,
box in the
yeah, just
ceiling so Kevin's
right.
head would fit in that
Yes,
thing.
yes, yes, all of that. Yep, all of those things. Yeah, the KinCom down there in the basement. I mean, what? Fortunately, we had the folks across the hall that had a lot of drugs. The pharmacy was right across the
Yeah.
hall. So, man, what a deal! I think about that health center now. I can remember when Don Purvis told me we were going to build a new arena, which is now Worthen Arena.
Yeah.
And Rex, we need you to design the training room. Okay, great. So we still lived in that house. Eileen and I still lived in that little blue house, brand new house. So I get all the books out. I have diagrams on our living room floor. This is the honest to God truth. And
Yeah.
I designed a beautiful 5,000 square foot training room. All the rooms were in it, just like it is now,
Yeah.
except that when they built it exactly half of what I asked for. So instead of 5,000, it's 2,500. And they didn't tell me.
Yeah.
Had they said, "Hey, you're going to have only 2,500 square feet," I might have done something a little bit different. But instead, they just took all the rooms and shrank them into half.
Yeah.
So, hey, it's a functional place, but it got pretty crazy in there too. It was
Yeah.
organized chaos a lot of times,
Yeah. And
as it is here. But
and still
yeah.
is. It was interesting because a couple weeks ago I had a chance to go to my coffee groups. I haven't had a lot of chances. I've got a second job actually working for Purdue right now.
Oh,
But I had a chance to go to coffee, and Jerry Pearson's in there in that little coffee group. And so he's like, "Hey, have you gone over to basketball practice?" I'm like, no. And he goes, "You got to go over with me." So I went over and was watching practice, and I met the new men's basketball athletic trainer, a young lady named Jessica Kinder, and I'm talking to her, introducing myself, and asking her, how are things going, da 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 da, and she goes, "Yeah, things are things are a little tight in that room," and I go, "They always have been, and you have to figure out how to coordinate things to where you are." Not stepping on each other's toes, and
yeah.
that's just that football's not in there anymore,
I
obviously.
know, I
And
know.
so I can only imagine what it was like when everybody was
Tight,
over there,
tight. It was tight, but again, it was fun, and we made it work.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was tight, and so was the football athletic training room at that time.
Oh yeah.
That little bit place out there, man. I mean, we did some good work. I don't know how. I really don't know how. I mean, I look back on those days.
There
I don't know
the
how.
Outback,
Yeah, we made the outback. It
you
used to
made
be,
the
it used to rain out. When it rained hard, we couldn't even use that area out
yeah.
there. Yeah. Oh my God.
No,
Yeah, I don't know how we did.
that football training room, uh I have a lot of fond memories in that place.
Yeah.
Just from the fact that it was so tight, and everybody was kind of elbows next to each other, but we were all in the same boat. So I mean, what were we going to complain about? Just the ins and outs of that, and then being just basically right around the corner from the football locker room, which there was always hijinks going on in there.
Or
Um,
hijinks. There's a hijinks. Tomorrow's 11/11, by the way. That was one of the biggest hijinks. Just, yeah.
do we want to share this story on the
No, hell no.
podcast?
I'm not. No, 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 no. I'll let Neil tell that story on your next podcast. But no, the date
Yeah.
11/11 is significant in the annals of athletic training, so to speak. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I've actually shared that story with a couple people just to see their reaction
Yeah.
on that, and yeah. So yeah, we'll have to say that for another podcast. But
Yes, we shall.
so you're in your time, just like you were building stuff at Northeast, you built a lot of stuff up in your 11 years at Ball State. What are some of your more prouder moments in that process in your time there?
Well, I think it really, Troy, a lot of it was hiring Mike, getting Mike there. He was the right guy at the right time. Uh, and then him helping clinically. I've always felt like that his desire to and willingness to help out in the clinical setting, because as you and I both know, that doesn't happen a lot nowadays, right? I mean,
Oh,
unfortunately, there's oftentimes a division between the clinical aspect of athletic training and the educational, didactic. But Mike was willing to do a little of both, at least his first 2 or 3 years. And I really feel like that helped us in a lot of ways. And then when we hired Tom
yeah.
Widener, that was huge. And I can remember being a part of that process. And that meant a lot, for Mike to even incorporate me. I mean, he didn't have
Yeah.
to, but getting to know Tom and Mike and I were there together for 11 years, and then he went to Georgia and I went to Missouri, and then Tom took over, obviously. But a lot of good things, man. Yeah, I look back. I mean, you come in with plans. You go in there and you think, here's what I'd really like to do, but then you have to be realistic and look at the resources that you have. Uh, and I think we were pretty well supported. I think Don Purvis left shortly after I got there. But one thing Don and Pat, his wife Pat, one thing they did was every fall they had a get together of the whole athletic department staff, and that really helped foster a lot of camaraderie.
Right.
And then with Paul Shudell, he was the same way. He and Mary would always make sure that Eileen and I were included in anything that was with football staff, and that was huge. And it's that family feel that we had when I was there.
Yeah.
And then I tried to extend that same feel, if you will, to you, all of you as students.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we had a strong group. And even to this day, I'm so proud of all of you all. That group we got together this summer in Indianapolis, or many, many, many other times. We started the alumni parties. We started the alumni get-togethers at the convention,
Right.
and those always were really meaningful. In addition to having a great time, yes, we've laughed about a lot of stories and things, but that's meaningful to me.
Yeah.
And because it's again, it gets lost sometimes, but this profession's all about relationships.
Yeah.
And not only are we trying to provide good healthcare and obviously educate students and things, but making some lifelong relationships is really important to me.
Yeah,
So
no, and you obviously you and Tony and stuff did a great job of that, and from just the the runs to the village
yeah,
pantry
yeah,
during
thought about
football
that the other
to
day.
Chi-Chi's
Yeah, that too.
to
Yeah,
when we needed to have a talk, it wasn't, if it was a serious talk, yeah, we'd sit in an office, but a lot of times it was on front porches or
yeah,
someplace for lunch or, Red and Ruth's. I mean, holy
yeah. Red
smokes.
Roost. Yeah,
Yeah.
driving to Red Roost. I
Yeah.
was thinking about the runs to Village Pantry the other day, and I don't remember why, but I guess I stopped at 7-Eleven down here to get an iced tea or something, and I was thinking about all those days, man, from football when the students would run over to Village Pantry. And I know Rob Hunt has talked about the first time he had to go over there, he didn't know what was a schlong and what was a, you know, Retson and
Yeah.
he had all those things that we've laughed about. It might
I
Spinal, he
mean,
had no idea.
yeah, I mean, some of that stuff you were just trying to see if they could figure it out,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. That's right. It's part of figuring it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was fun, and I look back on those days very fondly, and I think. From the physical resources, we weren't able to do a lot, physical resources, because I know Paul Shadell would tell you too, but with the stadium, all those years I was there, we really tried to get lights and we tried to expand the stadium, but the argument was always, well, you're winning already. Why would we want to do anything
Right.
for you? You're already winning. And then it took Paul leaving before somebody wised up enough to say, well, we need to at least add the other side to the stadium. And then obviously the other night I watched it on TV. It looks quite a bit different. There weren't very
Yeah.
many more people there than there were back then, but and it was raining. It looked like a terrible night there, but I did watch part of the game the other night. In fact, I was at Landshark down on the beach, and Eileen was late getting there, and I'd ridden my bike there, and I'm watching the game, and the bartender came over, and I said, I know you've been wondering ever since I've been watching this game. I went to school there, and I work there. And she said, "Holy cow!" She said, "I didn't even know there was a place called Ball State." I said, "Yeah, yeah. There it was." And she
There it
she
was.
she stood there and watched the game with us for a little while too.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I know it's changed a lot. I'd like to get back there some of these days and kind of take a look at. Yeah, it's been a long time since I've been there, but I'd like to get back and maybe visit Neil and do some things there. But
Yeah. No, no, that would be that and I mean they're getting ready to break ground because when we went to Worthen last night to watch the state volleyball
yeah,
finals, I was pointing out to Cindy where they're going to build this new, they call it a sports performance center at Worthen, next to the practice gym and stuff. And
Mhm.
they had it all marked off. And I said, they got to be breaking ground on this pretty soon because they want this done by the end of 2025.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
supposedly that's going to open up, according to Sean, the old weight room will be the new athletic training room.
okay.
But
Yeah.
we've both decided we're not holding our breaths on that. So we're
Yeah,
gonna, because
yeah,
just like what you explained, we're already doing this. Why do you need
yeah,
it? Why do you need
yeah.
that? But
Yeah, Sean
so
was there. Sean was probably our graduate assistant when we were in the health center that year too, as a matter of
yeah,
fact. So he experienced a submarine as well.
yeah,
What
very
a what
much
a
so.
God, you look back on that. That was a we needed to move somewhere. That they were kind enough to let us go over there, but that was a tough time for us.
Yeah, it was. You were. I mean, and what I remember, the university gym athletic training wasn't huge,
No, not at
but
all.
it wasn't the health center. And
No.
how you took care of people, I mean, and managed to take care of people between that facility, the ball gym facility, and the football facility. Um, with the staff that you had, I mean,
Yeah.
those people still got taken care of. So
Yeah, they did. Yeah. It's like the line in Christmas Vacation. I had a lot of help from my friends, Jack Daniels and Jim Beam. They-
Jim and Jack, yeah, there they go.
Jim Zave. Yeah.
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 Um, I've got to ask you this, and I know we're getting bumped up on time a little bit, but I would be remiss if for all everybody thinks about you working football, but you also work men's volleyball.
Yeah, I did.
So, do you have a favorite Don Shondell story?
Well, yeah, I can't tell you that one, but you know, I I've got a couple. You know, first the assistant coach that was there when I first started there was Dave Gelios,
Yeah.
and Dave I think is maybe an area FBI director at this point. He left there to go into FBI. I know he's in the FBI,
Yeah.
and I remember Dave really well. And then it was John Waite. John was an assistant, and you know when you travel, God, it's funny. There's a lot of funny stories when you travel with volleyball, and then Joel, you know, Joel
Yeah,
Baldwin,
yeah, yeah.
the next assistant, and so traveling with volleyball was such a change from football. I will tell you though, and I know you know the story. I'm going to go football first. My first road trip with football was to West Lafayette. We played Purdue. And so Tony, Neil, it was Tony, Deb Wright, Joanne Winters, myself, maybe Bruce, maybe Brett Draper, probably Doug Dietzel, and Ton Wynn. So we went over to West Lafayette, and our room was on the second floor. And again, I'd worked with him for all of a month. You know, Coach Shadell and I had worked together for a month, and again, we get along great. We're on the second floor. Dr. Hall took the trip with us, Bob Hall. So Bob Hall was sitting by my door. It was one of those kind of the door into my room was from the outside. It was like a Holiday Inn or something like that. We stayed in West Lafayette. So Dr. Hall was sitting next to the door. Tony was on top of his bed in a chair, and he had taken the chair and put it up on the bed. And we were having a couple of beers, right? So Dr. Hall, so somebody knocks at the door. Dr. Hall just kind of reaches around him and opens, it didn't even look, just opens, flings the door open, and it's Coach Shadell. Shit. So I mean, I must have sprinted to the door.
And this is a coach that does not drink, right?
Maybe a little bit now, but certainly not then.
Yeah.
But you know, it was, hey, what are you doing in here? You know, that kind of thing. So we we had some fun there, man, that night.
And Dr. Hall did drink.
Oh, yes, yes, he did. As a matter of fact, yes, and it was a really good physician for us. He was
Yeah.
a former emergency room physician, so he dealt with a lot of trauma stuff, and he was good with football. He and Dr. Klaus were quite a pair.
Oh my goodness.
So that was my first football trip. But to go back now to volleyball. So, you know, with football, we took two buses, offense, defense bus, and I'd always be on the offensive bus with Coach Shadell, and then moved to volleyball where we took vans,
Yeah.
with few exceptions. And I always drove a van. So Don would ride with me most of the time. And they played, the thing for me was they played cards the whole dang time. They played spades, I guess it was. So I'm driving along. Don's very competitive with spades. And they could play lit for hours. I'd be zipping along in the van and they'd be playing and he'd be writing notes about stuff. I mean, there are other funny stories. I cannot tell some stories, but I do know this one though, that we were at Penn State. So we'd driven over to Penn State. We were playing Penn State, and then we were going to move on to Navy and George Mason. So we were on like a week long trip, and we were at Penn State, and Don and I roomed together, and John Waite was on the floor. Okay, so he's sleeping on the floor. Don's got a bed. I've got a bed, and I wake up in the morning, and Don is trying to get something out of his drawer, and he's straddling John Waite, laying on the floor. And John woke up, and he looked up, and he screamed, you know. And, hey, that's just one story. I mean, I've got lots of stories. But we had great success with volleyball while I was there. I think we went to the Final Four maybe 9 times of my 11 years there, maybe 10.
Yeah.
And the thing that I really appreciated about volleyball was, you know, I would work that until spring football started. And then we had great students like you and others that were able to take those trips. And Don was always gracious enough to, to make sure that happened wherever that would be, California,
Right.
other, all those Final Four trips. I never, except for the time we hosted the Final Four, and I've got a picture of you and I in that
Yeah.
picture with Jay Matchett and yeah, Tom Severe. Except for when we actually hosted the Final Four, I never worked at a Final Four. I would travel, like if it was in Fort Wayne, Eileen and I would drive up and watch us play. But whether it was Bill Cowgill or you or Mike Miller or Dan Tini or somebody, somebody else was always on the bench.
Lito. Yeah.
Mark Lee, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
really, there's so many. Weichel, I mean,
Yeah.
guys that would actually physically have the opportunity to go and work in a Final Four atmosphere, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And I really am appreciative for Don Shondell for allowing that to happen. He could have said, "No, Rex, we've got to have you've got to go," and he never did that. And I think that was really cool.
Yeah.
And then Joel, of course, succeeded Don as the head coach and was there for many years. And I've kind of lost track of Joel, but we had a lot of fun with those trips. And I think you really get to know people when you're in a band. When you're in a band for
Yeah.
12 to 14 hours, you've taken the old Genesee tour, whatever you guys did. But
Yeah. Oh
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
That well, and you stop at, I mean, you stop at places and these really tall guys get out and they don't know what to make out of that.
yeah.
And um and there was characters on those teams. I mean, there
Oh,
were,
oh, we had characters.
yeah.
We went to Hawaii. We went to Hawaii. My third or fourth, probably my eighth. I guess it's nine. It had to be 91 to somewhere right in there because Audrey was born by then. And I promised her I would take her to Hawaii because she couldn't go with me, and I've never taken her yet. So I'm sure she'll need to go at some point. But anyway, I flew to Hawaii. We flew to Hawaii. We went out of Indianapolis, so we vanned to Indianapolis, flew to St. Louis, and from St. Louis to Honolulu. And we played in the Final Four preview tournament, which was Hawaii, UCLA, Pepperdine, and us, I think, or Brigham Young instead of Pepperdine, maybe. But what a great week. And we had success out there too. I mean, we really could never overcome the UCLAs, USCs. We
Right.
never could, just couldn't quite get over the hump. But we competed, man. I mean, and we were out there for a week. Joel and I roomed together, the Outrigger Hotel, and had a really really good week out there. And then the
Yeah.
California trips, we'd go over spring break a lot of times, or and I'd travel along with guys there. We'd fly to LA, play UCLA, USC, drive down to San Diego, play San Diego State, maybe Loyola Marymount, and then come back. And
Yeah.
that was a lot of fun.
They just posted the schedule for this next year and it looks so much different from those days. I mean,
Yeah,
it's you're playing these small schools out in North Carolina.
really.
Um those, I mean, obviously in the conference they're playing Lewis and Purdue
Yeah,
Fort Wayne
yeah,
and that stuff, but those big, I mean, I think Stanford's coming to Muncie, but it's just a different. I mean,
hmm
men's volleyball is just different because it's so
yeah.
small right now. And
Yeah, yeah. I remember when Lewis started, and I remember Graceland over in Lamona, Iowa, which, when you're a Lewis, and they ended up winning the NCAA championship at some point after I left Ball State. But when you're a Lewis or a Ball State and you're competing against UCLA or USC or Stanford, that is a big, big deal. And or Penn State, we weren't any of those schools, but we sure could compete with them on the volleyball court.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah, no, it was. I mean, it just made it unique that you could
yeah,
say as a student for me that I worked men's volleyball
yeah.
and that was just something that's different but I mean in Muncie that's not a, I mean that's kind of the norm. So
You did help me host that Final Four, wasn't that you? You and
yeah,
Weichel?
it was me and Weichel and Dwayne Gove
Yeah, Dwayne. Yeah, right. I've
yeah,
got a
and
picture of us. And
Chad Kerwin
yeah,
and
and we
I
weren't
I
even
do
in,
I
we weren't
do
even in it.
what's that?
We weren't even in the Final Four that year.
No,
That's the
no.
darndest thing. Fort Wayne was the one that
Fort
Midwest.
Wayne was the one because they had those good outside hitters
Yeah,
that we just couldn't deal with. And then the
yeah,
thing that I remember the most was, you had gone to San Diego and Dwayne had gone. I forget what trip Dwayne had gone on to, but
yeah.
I was supposed to go to the Final Four, and we were playing at home, and we were up in that rally game, fifth set type deal, and we were up, and then we just totally came unhinged and lost to Fort Wayne, and they went to Hawaii because it was in Hawaii. They went to Hawaii, and and I didn't, and that was crushing. So that I thought, well, I'm going to go to Utah and get to go to Hawaii, and Bill said, no, you're working women's gymnastics, which is
Yeah,
probably the
yeah,
best thing
yeah.
that could ever happen.
I
Believe
know,
it or
I know,
not,
I know.
yeah. I finally made it to Hawaii in 2019
Okay.
over Christmas with basketball, and I think we stayed in the Outrigger Hotel
Did
actually.
you? Yeah, that was a nice place. Yeah.
So,
All right.
um, well, how much time? We've gone for an hour and a half. We haven't
I'm
even really.
done. I mean, I'm fine. All I'm gonna do is ride my
Okay.
bike.
Okay. So 1996, you've been at Ball State for 11 years. You've done some great stuff. Um, but in the back of your mind, you always had to think what would be a really cool job to go to.
Mhm.
And so this Missouri job comes open. Fred Wapple retires and stuff. Kind of walk me through a little bit of that process of
Yeah.
what led you to really look at that.
Well, there was one opportunity prior to that, and that was at Northwestern. And I really thought that would be a good place to go. That had to be, I don't know, 93, maybe, I don't know. Seems like that was right. And so Eileen and I flew up there, yes, with Audrey, and I was offered that job, and it was a good job. And Gary Barnett was their head coach. I did meet with Gary Barnett, unlike Paul
Yeah.
Shadell. I did meet with Gary Barnett, and they had some great plans for their future. Gary ended up actually leaving Northwestern and going to Colorado, I think, and had some success out there. But I came back, and I came back after getting the job offer and met with the staff and students one morning, and just kind of laid it out. I've had this opportunity, I've got this chance, but Troy, it was came down to the people, and the program at Ball State meant an awful lot because we had a hand in developing what we had, and it was successful. And so I stayed. I ultimately stayed. Eileen didn't even know when I left the house that morning. She did not know my decision.
Yeah.
I really agonized over that one because Northwestern had a lot of potential.
Right.
But yeah, anyway, I stayed at Ball State, and I'm glad I did. And then, yeah, when there were two people really were instrumental in helping me get the Missouri job, I think. One was Cheryl Cundy was
Yeah.
there as an assistant at that time. Cheryl Storr, now
Yeah.
Cundy. One of our students from Ball State was Fred's assistant, and she had kind of knew Fred was leaving, and she let me know. And then John Hoke. John Hoke was a football coach. He was a player at Ball State when I was a student,
Yeah.
and John and his brother Brady. I think you've heard of
Yeah.
Brady Hoke. Brady and I were probably closer than John and I were in college. Brady was a student at Ball State also.
Yeah.
So anyway, John called and he said, "Hey, Fred's leaving," and I said, "Yes, I heard that." And he said, "Coach Smith would sure like you to take a look." Larry Smith was the head coach. He'd been there 2 years. Very reputable coach. He had won a
Yeah.
national championship. He had coached at USC, coached at Arizona. And I thought, well, that sounds like an intriguing opportunity. John also said we're going to join a new league called the Big 12 Conference. We're in the Big 8 now, but they're forming the Big 12, and it's going to start in the spring. And I thought, well, that sounds like a pretty cool thing. So, Troy, I went out there and interviewed. Joe Castiglione was the athletic director. He's now the athletic director at Oklahoma.
Okay.
Joe was very gracious, and he told me, he said, we're going to join this new league, and the facilities at Missouri really weren't very good. In fact, they really weren't very good at all. They
Right.
had a gymnasium called the Hearn Center. That room was pretty run down. Their football facility was not very nice, but there was a plan to build a new one, and that's what Joe shared with me. And I think I'm sure he had shared it with several others, but he had maybe shared it with some of the people at Missouri.
Right.
But sure enough, its parking lot at the stadium was still gravel. It didn't have lights. I mean, God, there's so many things that were. You just I look back on that now, and I'm thinking, what did entice me there? I don't know, but when I interviewed, Norm Stewart was the basketball coach there at that time. Um, again, Coach Smith was awesome. I mean, walking into his office, he was older. He had had great success, uh, but I was impressed. Coaches are recruiters,
Right.
that. So he's
Yeah.
doing his best to recruit me. And so I know most of the story, but I didn't. Not many people knew I'd even gone out there, frankly. But it was right around the end of May because it was right around the Indy 500
Right.
time. So I flew back into Indianapolis, and that in itself was quite a trip. And then got in the car, drove to David Jessup's house, and we had our normal Friday night get together prior to the
Right.
race. Uh, and that during that night, I needed to go back and talk to Eileen about Columbia, and because she was in Muncie with the kids, and so I I told everybody at the party that I was going to go to Kroger, and they all believed me. So then I left the house and drove all the way back to Muncie. I didn't say which Kroger. In my defense, I
Yeah,
could have gone to
exactly.
Kroger in Muncie, but everybody was like, "Where in the hell's Rex?" Well, he Rex was back in Muncie trying to tell his wife that we might make a move to Columbia.
Probably the only time that anybody ever, usually it was where's Neil or where's Tony,
Yeah, sure, sure, sure. Yeah. Well, Tony has a reputation for not, you know what I mean. So yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, I know.
let's go hunting. That's as Lito would say, let's go hunting. But I think I went back and talked to her, and then I didn't know that I'd gotten the job for sure, but I felt really strongly that I would. So the following Tuesdays when the call came, and we had decided that she needed to go visit. So we went out there. We drove that time and visited Columbia. And Columbia is a great town. It's a great college
Yeah.
town.
Yeah.
80 about well at that time it was about 100,000. I like in Gainesville, Florida. Now that I'm in Florida, Gainesville, University of Florida, and University of Missouri, the towns are very similar. And I like college towns. They're
Yeah.
it's a great vibe. It's a lot of energy all the time, and so I did take the job. And again, I look back at that first time, Troy, we didn't have much. We didn't have a lot. The room wasn't very nice. I had Eric McDonald and Cheryl Cundy were my two assistants, and I only had a handful of students. We didn't have a program, so these were just students that we paid to
Right.
help. We like work study type stuff, or uh, there were some good ones, and somehow we made that work. And one of the first meetings I had there was with the dean of health professions, Rich Oliver, and I went and I said, I really want to get us an athletic training program. I mean, you've got a medical school, you've got physical therapy, you've got occupational therapy,
Right.
and they had everything in place except the athletic training thing. And he liked that idea, and he liked it so much that 15 years later we actually got that
I was gonna
done.
say
But
that's a
funding was an issue, and so I took advantage of, and I kept after it, man. I mean, every year I never gave up. I'll put it that way. And then we had the opportunity to hire a new chair of orthopedic surgery at the medical school, Jim Stannard. And I was part of that interview process, and I was honored to be. I mean, I think because of my persistence with the program, maybe I've been a real pain in the ass for somebody, but they wanted to make sure I had an opportunity to meet with the new orthopedic chair. And so we were standing in the what was a fairly new facility. I designed 6 of the 8 training rooms they have at Missouri now. I've designed them, so I'm pretty proud of that too.
yeah.
But we were standing in the relatively new facility with the SwimX, and I was showing Dr. Stannard around, and he said, "Well, let's say I take this job, Rex." He said, "What do you need?" And I said, "Well, to be honest with you, Dr. Stannard, physical resources, we've got great things right now. This room is beautiful, and it was." And it was 10,000 square feet, and it had every amenity you can imagine. And that was only one of 7 other training rooms we had, and the 8th one being the new football facility, which I designed. It's pretty nice. Uh, anyway, he said, "What do you need?" And I said, "Well, we really want to get a program." And he said, "Well, how much would it be?" I said, "Well, it'd be, the cost of bringing somebody in to be the director and then the secretary and support stuff." And so he took a note of that, and he did get the job, and he fronted us $200,000 to get things off the ground.
Wow.
And I will never, and we've repaid that. I mean,
Right.
but I'll never forget that about him. And we did get the program started, and it ended up being a good program until we decided that we just didn't want to make the move to a master's program. That's
Right.
all. We hired Dave Colt was our program
Right.
director.
Yeah.
And when he retired, Keith Belmore was one of my former graduate assistants. He was the assistant. We just decided it just wasn't we weren't interested in doing that,
Yeah.
and that kind of coincided with me wanting to get out anyway and retire. So uh, that's what happened there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, um, that's the thing I think about, your career was really about you were very laser focused on trying to make things better than
Yeah,
where you found them. And
yeah,
I think we've all had that value instilled in us, whether it be from you or Tony or my parents or whatever. But you always want to try to make something a little bit better than the way when you came in. And that Missouri situation, I remember, I think it was probably about, well, it might have been 96 that we came out to visit, and you were
It
showing me
was.
around,
Yeah.
and you're like, this is not what it's going to be.
Right. Yeah.
This is
It
not what it's
was
going to
96.
be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
we're not going to settle on this.
Yeah.
And it, the advances that you made kind of grew with Missouri, from being in the Big 12 all the way
Yeah.
up through going to the SEC,
Right.
and now probably one of the premier, even though those SEC programs seem like they just keep building and building and building. I mean, what they have is your vision,
Well,
and I think
the athletic healthcare model that we had right before I left, I would have put that staff against anybody in the country.
yeah,
It really, I mean, it was the staff and the students that we had. I would say I know we did it the right way.
yeah,
And I'm really proud of that. And in those 8 facilities, 6 of which I had a hand in putting together. And so they should not be wanting for anything right now
right,
there.
yeah,
And the SEC, yes, that was fun. There's some great people in the Big 12. There were some great people in the SEC staff wise. And I used to sit down with them when we'd have our spring meetings. And a lot of times it was, well, I know for sure, Texas A&M at the time, Carl Kopczynski came up. Oh, it's been 10 years ago. And he sat down with me in my office and he said, how did you do this?
yeah,
That kind of thing. And it took a long time and you just had to have the right people in the right place at the right time. Joe Castiglione was awesome. But when Joe left, we got a guy, athletic director named Mike Alden. And I think Eileen's actually up in Columbia right now at a church reunion. And I have a feeling she probably ran into Mike and Rocky today
yeah,
at the reunion. It wouldn't surprise me a bit. But Mike worked out every day in the training room in the morning on the Stairmaster, and I did too. We would never be side by side, and we hardly ever talked because both of us were preparing for our day.
yeah,
But there are occasions when we did talk, and we made some decisions during those mornings that ultimately benefited our system. So that was really nice.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And again, like you talked about, there's relationships. I mean,
Yep. For sure.
and what we were talking about before we started this podcast, it's interesting the things that get done in the most un um unexpected places. So at this memorial service the other day for Warren Vanderhill,
Mhm.
there was a couple of faculty guys that said if people only knew the things that got taken care of in the ball gym locker
Yep.
room,
Yep. Yep.
he goes, there were a lot of
Easy
things.
now. Easy now. I don't know if we want to know this on this podcast. I'm not.
No, but
No, but seriously, you're right about that, man. And when
yeah,
I was at Michigan Tech, really, when I was at Michigan Tech, Troy, the president of the school used to come over and play racquetball at the student development complex, and we were in the locker room together a lot,
yeah,
and we talked a lot. I mean, I was a graduate assistant, but
yeah,
we talked a lot about stuff, and that's
yeah.
exactly what happens for
Yeah,
sure.
I
Yeah,
mean, and that's the thing is that they talked about how, like, shoot, and I think Warren had told me this at one time, but the discussion about Rick Majerus was initiated probably in that ball gym locker room after working out
yeah,
with different, he would work out with different people,
yeah. Right.
and so it's I think relationships are super super important. They still are.
Yes,
Um,
indeed.
and to be able to establish those relationships and then communicate those needs because of those relationships to get things done. It's not done you can't just send an email and say, this is what I want, because who are you and why?
Right. Right.
Or a text message or any of that stuff. You still have to build
Yeah.
relationships to get things done. Um, hopefully some of that is not totally lost on this younger
I hope
generation.
not. I hope not. I know when we, going back to the days at Ball State there with our team physicians, we talked about Dr. Klaus and Dr. Hall, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Dr. Hibansky, Alan Hibansky, who had been working there for years before I got there.
Right.
But there was, and did great work with, he and Don Vogelsang were probably what Dr. Matchett and I became later
Right.
on.
Yeah.
We had this new orthopedist named Jay Matchett. Jay and Mary Ann and Eileen and I went to church together, and we ended up, fortunately, being able to convince Dr. Matchett to help us out as a team
Right.
physician. And you know what happened from
Oh
there.
yeah.
So just that's another great family, the Matchett family. And man, but again, the timing was everything. Dr. Urbanski he was just about wanting to get away a little more and get away more and more outside of athletics. And then Jay Matchett comes in from Indiana University, and that worked out great for us,
Yeah.
And it's just timing and relationships, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was actually since their youngest daughter, Katie, is the next door neighbor of Neil's.
Yes.
We go trick-or-treating in Neil's neighborhood. It's just easier comparative to the
Yeah.
boonies that where I'm living at right now. Beautiful outside, but trick-or-treating is not good.
Yeah.
And so I kind of came in later. Um, and usually Neil and I we take advantage of our time together on Halloween while the kids are trick-or-treating. We kind of have our own little
Yeah.
party going on. And so I walked over
Yeah.
there, and Jay and Mary Ann were out there, and it was great to kind of catch up with them. But we talked a little bit about kind of, Ball State moved away from CIO this year. And
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't
yeah,
know that.
and so because IU Health has come in and they've started an
Okay.
orthopedic group, and they threw a wad of money at the athletic department. And
Okay.
of course, there's not any continuity in the administration, so they don't understand the history between Ball State and CIO. They just know that they're going to give them a bunch of money.
Money. Yep. Sure.
And so,
Yes.
and how he was, he was how hurt he was basically of that decision, even though it didn't have, Sean didn't have any. Sean found out from the athletic director this is
Yeah.
what we're
Sure.
going to do
Of
in an
course.
email of all things, in an email.
Yeah.
And so
Things there. Yeah. That's not good.
yeah. So anyway, the thing was, I said, listen, the thing is that as sad as that is, they'll never take away the memories and the stories and any of the stuff that was with our group. We'll always have that, and maybe that'll never happen again. But just the whole thing. Again, Kevin, we bring up Kevin Furnish, but
Yeah.
we're sitting in the ER waiting room together at ball waiting for Kevin to come, be in the ER, and that lady comes out and says, Savage, Savage, and you're like, yes, I am. Thank you very much. And then I
Yeah.
have to tell Kevin that and Dr. Matchett, and it's hilarious. They thought that was hilarious. So
Yeah, God, I can remember honestly, there was one basketball game down at Ohio. Well, a couple times we did this. Dr. Matchett, they chartered a plane, and so we were going to go down to Athens. So it was Dr. Matchett, Dr. Severe, myself, and Tom Severe is like 6'7", 6'5",
yeah,
6'6", whatever he is. So Jay Matchett, Tom Severe, myself, and it had to be one more person. It had to be. So anyway, we fly from Muncie. We charter a little plane. We fly down to Athens. We get to Athens where they had rented a car. Well, the car was a small car. So you got Tom Severe, six, whatever he is. So in the back seat of this car, it's Tom Severe, myself, and whoever went with us, and Jay Matchett is laying across our lap. Now that until we got to the arena, that really happened. And then there was one other trip we went down to. I think it was the Xavier game. I think we or he chartered a plane. We flew down to. That was when David Brose was a player,
yeah,
and he played against, and he had probably the best game he's ever had. But we were there that night too. We had chartered a plane, so those are fun trips.
yeah,
And ironically enough, down here, Troy, at Embry-Riddle, we were when I got here, the team physician was about ready to leave and start a private practice. So my team physician, one of our team physicians in Columbia, was about ready to leave Columbia, or at least just get out of. So I called him and I said, Dennis, we've got the opportunity here if you're interested. So he talked to his wife, and he's our team physician here now. And
so
Dennis wins. So, and that has helped us, again, trying to elevate the healthcare. This has elevated our ability to provide good healthcare for our student athletes here. So having him here.
yeah, and that's cool because you've already got that established, that
I don't know.
relationship
We're working at it. We're working at it. Yeah. Yeah.
I do have a Tom Severe story I want to share with you because I know you'll appreciate this. But when I was working at CIO, Tom was obviously supervising the fellowship program and stuff, which is that's a whole nother podcast, is the fellowship program. It
Yeah,
really
sure.
is. But he had been at this place called Roly Poly, which was a rap place in the village. And he goes there for lunch. He comes back, and I noticed he wasn't talking a whole lot. And we're like, Dr. Severe, what's going on? And he opens up his mouth, and I guess when he played high school basketball at Brazil, he had gotten his front tooth knocked out. and had an implant in, but the veneer over the implant had fallen out when he took a bite out of this wrap.
Oh,
So
yeah.
he was still seeing a few patients then. So so he was seeing patients with one front tooth knocked out. And he,
Yeah.
and you know how he was. He was all put together all the time.
Yeah. All the
And
time. Yeah.
and he was actually laughing about it. Like he goes, "Hey, I know that you think I'm this hillbilly, I'm this great doctor, but I'm really just a hillbilly from Southern Indiana."
Right. Yeah.
And
Yes.
so,
That's very funny.
and
Very
so
funny.
so he
Yeah.
saw his patients, eventually got it fixed, but he was so it was not, just remembering him from when I was a student to where he was in the clinic there, he was a lot more he was more of a real person
Yeah. I'm sure
than
that's
what I
right. Yeah. For
remember
sure.
from my
Yeah.
time as a student there. And
Right. Right.
I've always laughed about that because um he was just a regular guy, and I
Yeah.
owe him a lot because it was like a master's level class, particularly in billing and healthcare. Um, when we'd have downtime, he would explain all this stuff with Medicare, Medicaid, and how things were set, and why, athletic trainers it's great that we're trying to get third party billing, but you're spinning your wheels
Yeah.
basically,
Yeah.
with that. And so it was a great opportunity, which it's hard to believe that's almost 20 years ago that.
Yeah. And that's something. Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
So,
We had a good thing going there, Troy.
oh yeah, we did. You did. We just kind of followed along.
Oh,
So
okay. Okay. All
yeah,
right.
yeah. So you end up retiring from Missouri. Had a
Yeah.
great run, 25 years there, great
Yep.
run at Missouri.
Yeah.
Um, and you're kind of retired, and so what's your thought process and all this, and then how do you end up at Embry-Riddle?
Yeah. That's a good question. So, yeah, I retired and was bored as heck, having worked 16-hour days or 14-hour days or 12-hour days for 25 years. Eileen was still teaching, and she was going to teach through that year. I retired in August 8th was my last day. She was just starting school, and she was going to teach one more year. And we knew that. So she was going to retire in June of 21. And yeah, June of 20. Yes, that's right. So then I was pretty bored. Eileen would go to work in the morning. I'd go out and ride my bike, that's when I really started riding my bike. And so she'd leave at 8. I'd watch a movie. I'd leave at 10, bike for 3 or 4 hours, come back. She'd come home. We'd go out that night, whatever. The kids were in town, of course, still at that point. And so then January came around and it was getting pretty cold to ride the bike. And so there was a little clinic down, well, it's a pretty good sized clinic down in Jefferson City, which is about a 30-minute south of Columbia, Capital Region Sports Medicine. And they provided health care to the high schools. And so they had an opening. So I called and I just said, hey, and they were freaked out that I would even be interested because, for 25 years, I was the figurehead of sports medicine in the
Yeah.
state of Missouri, really. But they were happy. And so I went down and I actually worked at Jeff City High School, which is a big school. And I didn't work with football. So I started out in the winter in January and worked with basketball, boys and girls basketball, and every team and baseball and track and field. So every team I worked with ended up going into the Final Four of the state championships. I know what I did. I know what I did. And so I know what contributions that I made. And I think they really appreciated that and on and on. But so May comes around, school's over, Eileen's done in June, and I get this buddy of mine was an athletic trainer down here at a local high school, University City High School. He's a little bit younger than me, but not much. And he saw that this job was open. And he called me and he said, hey, you and Eileen going to think about retiring down in Florida? Yes. And we had vacationed here in this area,
Yeah.
not in Daytona Beach per se, but Ormond Beach or Ormond by the Sea, which is out right on the beach. And we'd been here for a number of times, including our 40th wedding anniversary. I mean, our 30th wedding anniversary. And so I think Perry must have called the AD here, John Phillips. And so John and I called him and he said, would you really be interested in coming down here and working at Embry-Riddle? And I said, well, yeah, I mean, yes, we're going to move anyway. Okay. So if that job's there, we're moving. And so go down and yeah, got the job. And it's a great job and they're great kids here. They're great people here. I've got a good staff to work with. It's not Missouri. from the resource standpoint.
Right.
So there are some things, just like you said, I mean, you learn how to do things. Thankfully, the experience at Northeast Missouri, you go back to that and think you don't need all the fancy bells and whistles all the
Right.
time. If you know what you're doing, you can still provide good health care. The kids really appreciate it, and that's kind of where we are right now. I'm in my fourth year now. I work with men's lacrosse primarily, clinically.
Yeah.
We had a scrimmage yesterday, and I love working lacrosse. We don't have football.
Yeah.
We're never going to have football, which is good. I'm done with football.
Yeah.
But lacrosse is challenging. I mean, we've got a 56-man roster right now, and I'm by myself. And yesterday morning, for example, we had a scrimmage. We scrimmaged an NAIA team. It's just a scrimmage. The spring is the season, so we're just scrimmaging. And I'm setting up the field. Well, it's been a few years since I set up the field.
Yeah.
I mean, I laugh about this every time I do it too. But I would, for football at Missouri, I'd be at the hotel with the team, and I'd walk on the field right before the game started, and everything was done.
Yeah.
It's not that way here.
Yeah.
And I do have people that help. I mean, I've got really good help, but lacrosse is a demanding sport. It's physical, and it's fun. It's a different sport for me. I'd never seen 1 minute of lacrosse in my life before I moved here. But our league here in every sport, the Sunshine State Conference in Florida, is arguably the best Division II league in the country.
Right. Yeah.
Arguably. I mean, there'd be one other league that might say that, but I mean, in every single sport in the Final Four in Division II, there's going to be at least one team from this conference. I mean, tennis, for example, the first and second place team in the NCAA are both in this conference.
Yeah.
And golf, this conference, in lacrosse, fourth place team, and they won the national championship the year before. So it's on and on and on, Troy. I mean, it's really baseball. Tampa won the national championship there in our conference. I mean, it's a heck of a place, and we're just trying to get into the conference tournament if we can in lacrosse this year. We'll be okay. Yeah. But I do love it. It has presented some challenges. We have a new athletic director, which I love. She's the right person at the right time. Again, it goes back to so many times in my career, the right person at the right time. And I think we've got a chance to really do some special things here. Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, Eileen is the one that's fully retired. So she flies to Columbia. She's involved in this, and this. So she's fully retired. I failed at retirement.
I hear you're making trips to Pittsburgh a little bit more too nowadays.
Yeah, we've been to Pittsburgh. And we get around. I'll tell you, for the last hurricane that we had, which that's something that was new for me. I'd not ever experienced too many of those up in Missouri.
Yeah.
But anyway, the last hurricane, we went ahead and evacuated over to the Gulf Coast. She and I did, and just had a wonderful week. Unfortunately, we felt really bad for people here and horribly for people down south of here, which really got hit awfully hard. We're over there, and it's 86 degrees and sunny every single day.
Right.
I think we made the right decision. Then when we came back here, we resumed school, and we're rolling again. So, yeah, we like it here.
Yeah. No, I don't think you're when you work really hard for a long time, it's okay to find a spot to land.
Yeah, I've heard that before. Yeah.
Yeah. It's okay to find a spot to land where you can enjoy yourself. And
yeah, I've heard that. We're trying. We are enjoying ourselves. I mean, I ride my bike, like I told you before we started this, I ride my bike to work just about every day. It's 4 miles, but I make it about a 12-mile ride just to get a ride in. And then after work, typically at the end of the day, I'll ride my bike down towards the beach, and Eileen and I'll meet somewhere. And so that's another 10 or 12. I average about 25 miles a day, sometimes a lot more, but I've got 25 in today so far, so that's good.
Yeah. And a few more. A few more coming.
I got a few more coming. Yeah.
So long athletic training career. Just a short piece of advice to maybe some young athletic trainers out there, because again, mentorship is so important. You would, you've got some people you're probably mentoring now a little bit, but you were obviously mentors for me and a lot of other athletic trainers. But just a small piece of advice you might want to give here as we start wrapping this thing up a little bit.
Yeah. We've touched on this about 10 times on this call or this podcast. I think it's the relationship thing. Relationships built on trust and mutual respect. Communication. I think that hard work, your work ethic is going to be real important. But but again, you got to value the relationships that you have, and that's my biggest takeaway from my career. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being on here. It's going to be I don't know if I'll make this a two-parter or not. I might just let it roll.
It's up to you.
But I know that we've been working on this a little bit, and I've got one more person of this the three amigos that I got to get on the podcast, but I'm waiting for an opportunity, the right opportunity for him to
Yeah.
come. So,
Yeah.
but no, this is great. I'm glad you shared the story, and there's a lot more in there, I'm sure, but we may have to make that a private podcast somewhere down the line too, since
Yeah, well,
get those stories down a
yeah.
little bit too. But I really appreciate you coming on, Rex.
Sure, Troy, and thanks very much for even inviting me.
Yeah.
All right.
It was a must. So, all right.
Appreciate it.
We've gone off the roll with Rex Sharp. I want to thank Rex for coming on the podcast. That was a long one, and I kind of gave you fair warning in the intro, but there's a lot more to talk about with Rex and his career. We just kind of skimmed over the highlights of it. So hopefully we can have him on again and maybe pick out some specific time frames and delve a little bit deeper into what he's done, because he's done some amazing stuff. He is also a four-time Hall of Famer. He's in 4 Hall of Fames for athletic training and athletics. And I think there's probably a couple more, maybe one more in there that he'll be in. So a very, very special guest to have on, and I'm lucky to call Rex a mentor and a friend as well. So it was really cool for me to sit down and talk to him for a long time, and he gave us a lot of time to do that. So if you enjoyed this podcast, and hopefully you did because it was a long one, you can always reach out and give us feedback on offtherollpodcast@gmail.com. You can also, there's Spotify also allows for comments now. So you can leave some comments and ratings on Spotify. I think you can always leave ratings and comments on Apple Podcasts if that's where you're listening to it. Or you can reach out to me on my personal Facebook page. Or at Off the Roll Pod 1 on X or Twitter. Us old dudes like to still call it Twitter. So we're going to have some more guests on here as well. Hopefully some younger Ball State connected athletic trainers. And then we're going to throw in a few that are not connected to Ball State that I've always wanted to talk to and really enjoy having a great conversation. And that's what we did with Rex today. So everybody have a great day, and we'll see you next time on Off the Roll.